In the past few weeks, the news has been roiled by this confirmation process around Brett Kavanaugh and the ensuing revelation of an alleged attempted rape of Dr. Christine Ford, and I've been trying to pin down what exactly I'm feeling. The last 3 years have been fairly relentless in the quest to understand what I'm feeling right now, because the relentless revelations of sexual violence by powerful people have filled every possible news feed and thrown many people who have experienced sexual violence themselves into emotional tailspins. Lately, I think I've pinned down what I'm feeling right now, and it's deep and abiding anger about how much hypocrisy I'm hearing. All of our political parties claim to be centered on deep moral values. But on a national level, they are more likely all to be revealed as opportunists who are gamifying suffering and oppression to consolidate power. For example, I'm going to hit everybody, so don't feel like I'm picking on you. The established conservative movement has for decades reliably decried moral relativism as a threat to the nation. And now, they unblinkingly claim that sexual assault shouldn't be a disqualifier for judicial or presidential power. The liberal progressive movement is rightfully lifting that up as an abdication of stated moral values, while conveniently avoiding the fact that their own history is of doing the exact same thing, excusing the affairs and sexual predation of their own judges and presidents. Unless the religious community feels smug about anything, this hypocrisy can be found in our own backyard. Our bastions of moral wisdom are often revealed by grand juries and newspaper reporters to be shadowed institutions that perpetuate the evil they lecture us about. And I hear James just ringing in my ears. If you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be boastful. Do not lie to the truth. This wisdom does not come from God. It is earthly, it is devilish. For where there is envy and where there is selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. I hear him preach, and I feel like I'm just nodding consistently, because study after study after study shows us that the measure of a leader's morality ripples out into their organization. Hypocrisy and unrighteousness grow like a cancer throughout an institution when it is introduced from the top. Selfishness and ambition are seeds which grow disorder and wickedness, and we are living amongst the harvest of that growth. But let's not pretend that these seeds were planted 3 years ago or 10 years ago. For generations, we've been planting these seeds. For millennia even, we have searched for the wisdom upon which we would grow our civilizations, and we have, like Indiana Jones learns, chosen poorly. There may be millennia between our church and the churches that James was writing to, but the problem of wicked leadership seems to be the same. The United States may not be Rome, but that's more a measure of a difference of means than a measure of a difference in character. And why? Well, I think because as then, as now, we're all trying to win. We're all trying to chase and gain power. Or James would call it friendship with the world. Don't you know, he says, that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Isn't that how we justify sin when our leaders participate at whatever team we're on at the moment? The defenses of our current president's sexual immorality were the same defenses of our past president's sexual immoralities. If you want to hear terrible stories, Google LBJ. Regardless of party, it's always the excuse we make. This is wisdom from below. earthly wisdom, unspiritual wisdom that tells us ends justify means. That compromises have to be made to get policies passed. That you have to befriend the world to benefit the church. Except that's a lie. Being a friend of this kind of world, a world marked by naked ambition and boundless selfishness and deceit and chaos, is to make ourselves the enemy of the kingdom of God. So we know that, right? We know what unwise leadership looks like. We're surrounded by it. We feel degraded by it. We despair because of it. And I've only been voting since 2004, my first presidential election. You can calculate how old I am now. But what does wise leadership look like? What does leadership that's guided by God's goodness look like? Well, we're so overwhelmed by the bad leadership, we've forgotten that that's around us all the time, too. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights from September 1st, 2014 to just this last month, September 1st, 2018, the first Asian, Muslim, Arab to serve in that role. At the end of his tenure, he wrote an opinion piece in The Economist in which he grieved for the rise of authoritarian leadership in the U.S. and worldwide, but he also lifted up what he calls grassroots leadership. My hope, he wrote, lies in a set of people not widely known internationally, but familiar to those in the human rights community. Unlike the self-promoters, the elected xenophobes and charlatans, these people have courage. They have no state power to hide behind. Instead, they step forward. They are the leaders of communities and social movements, big and small, who are willing to forfeit everything, including their lives, in the defense of human rights. Their valor is unalloyed. It is selfless. He listed so many people I didn't even know existed. In Honduras, Bertha Zuniga Caceres, the young daughter of a murdered environmental activist who has bravely continued her mother's struggle. In Afghanistan, Dr. Seema Samar, who leads the country's independent human rights commission. In Thailand, Nkaka Nipalajit, whose husband, a lawyer, disappeared in 2004, and in that wake she became a courageous activist fighting against enforced disappearances. In Saudi Arabia, Hatun Awad al-Fassi and Samar Badawi, who are courageous leaders fighting for the rights of Saudi women, both of whom are currently detained by their own government. And in El Salvador, Carla Avelar, a courageous transgender activist. The wise leaders of our age are not just out in the world, though. They're here amongst us, too. James wrote, "Show with your life. Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness born of wisdom, the wisdom that's from above, and it's pure, and it's peaceable, and it's gentle, and it's flexible, and it's full of mercy and good fruit, without favoritism or hypocrisy. This is a harvest of righteousness that is sown in peace for those who make peace." Now, I have to admit that I struggled with the idea that gentleness is what our world needs right now, because it feels like it's on fire. In some places, it literally is on fire. But that's because I didn't understand what gentleness meant here. Gentleness isn't a cycle on the washer that I never use because I'm lazy, and it's always cold water, normal. Gentleness isn't timidity. Gentleness is restraint, coupled with courage. That's how Paul wrote pointedly to his church, but said, "What do you prefer? Shall I come to you with a whip? No, I come to you in love and a gentle spirit." When John Wesley espoused "do no harm," he meant gentleness. Gentleness doesn't mean you avoid confrontation or you don't critique the powerful who do harm. Gentleness is the means by which you do those things. My friend Amber is a Baptist minister in Kentucky, and she puts it like this: gentleness is what allows us to use soft startups to arguments with our loved ones so they can lower their defenses and actually hear us. Gentleness is what allows people to civilly disobey unfair laws to expose injustice and prejudice. Gentleness is what allows one individual to stand down a bully. And then I thought of some of you, like Laura, who's not here with us this morning, but who gently confronts her own implicit bias and then courageously helps others confront their own unexamined racism. Or Sarah and Ben and Mindy, who relentlessly attend every HISD board meeting and constantly, consistently, unapologetically advocate for the black and brown kids of HISD. I think of Jan, who always writes a card and remembers all the birthdays and gives good and hard advice over the phone and holds babies so people in crisis can have a moment's rest. Yes, we look out into the world and there are terrible leaders on the loudest horns possible, unwise leaders, and the fruits born from them are chaotic seeds of destruction. Yes. But we also, in the lives and the bodies and the faces of our neighbor, have living examples that the fruit of the wisdom of God is still growing in the world. Where the peacemakers are, there is God's wisdom growing. Where the merciful are, there is God's wisdom growing. Where the gentle are, there is God's wisdom growing. Where the honest are, there is God's wisdom growing. And we can plant the seeds of the kingdom of God in our everyday lives, in all of our communities, in every sphere of our life. We can cultivate leadership that produces a harvest of righteousness. We can draw near to God, knowing and trusting that God draws near to us. We do not have to wait for any permission. We do not have to wait for the unwise leaders amongst us to live in such a way, because at this point, I think only Jesus could do something about them, guys. We can begin, or we can continue. We can be rooted in the wisdom of God right at this very moment. We can stop caring about who's winning and start caring about who's healed. Whether we win anything is beside the point. We follow a guy who saved us all by dying, by being arrested and beaten by the empire, by going into a tomb and then just walking out one day because ultimately, evil always loses. Let's no longer be swallowed up by hypocritical systems, whatever they're named, that only fight for righteousness when they can get political points for it. Let us, by the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ, live good lives that bear good fruit, that grow wisdom not only for our community, but for everybody around us. And let's do it, because in that way, we bring in the very kingdom of God. Pray with me.